Hello all 8 of you, I'm Redkwan. A question that I've been wondering is, was Breath of the Wild really good? Of course, when it came out, it got a ton of critical acclaim, and a lot of that was justified. But when I played the game, I didn't think it was as terrific as the critics made it out to be. I mean, it has a 97 on Metacritic, and almost every major source gave it a 10 out of 10. I think it had the most 10 out of 10 a game has ever had, which part of that can be justified by an overall greater number of reviewing sources, but still, that's a crazy feat. Well, I think Breath of the Wild is a great game. I don't know if it deserves that level of acclaim. So I'm going to lay out a few reasons why I don't think Breath of the Wild is as good as people said it was when it came out. So one thing about Breath of the Wild, probably the main draw to Breath of the Wild, is the world. So it's touted as this giant, expansive world that you can run around in and explore, and it has tons of things to do, and it looks super varied. But when I played the game, I really didn't find those things. I mean, sure, the world is giant, and the design of the world looks really good to almost everyone that I've talked to, but in general, there isn't a ton to do in the world. Okay, there's a bunch of different places to go, but almost everything is just doing the same things in different areas. Yes, there might be mountains and grasslands, but aren't you really just doing the same thing in both of those places? You're running around, you're beating up guys. It's fun, but it's really the same thing. And I think that gets old, at least for me, because I can't justify continuing to play a game just because the world looks nice. I have to actually have things that I'm doing. And when I explored the world in Breath of the Wild, very rarely did I actually come across anything of interest. Yes, there were a couple towns. I wish there were a lot more towns. I think that would have made things a lot more interesting. I also wish there was more to do in the towns. For example, in the older Zelda games, towns had mini-games, they had activities that you could do, and they were all varied. But I feel like in Breath of the Wild, that's not a thing. There are shops, but there aren't really activities to do. There aren't like fun houses or people selling you sails in the Wind Waker. I don't know if that was fun, but it was something. It was something you could do. And Breath of the Wild really didn't have that. It felt more realistic to me. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean realistic as in, if you go into a real town, they aren't going to have a bunch of fun activities for you to do, but it was kind of missing that for me. A big reason was just that the world was giant, but there wasn't a ton to do in it. The second thing is that the dungeons, which are the main story plot of the game, I know people say it wasn't trying to do what the other Zeldas did. I shouldn't compare it to the other Zeldas and say it's not as good because it doesn't do what the other Zeldas did, but the main story of the game focuses on these divine beasts. To beat the game, it's very heavily recommended that you go to each of these divine beasts. That's basically the main story. And it's not great. So the divine beasts basically take the place of dungeons, and they're these giant mechanical beasts, and they look really cool. I'm not gonna lie. The inside of them, the actual dungeon area, is not very interesting at all. All of them look pretty much the same. They have 5 puzzles, and then you face a boss. And the puzzles don't take very long, which means the beast doesn't take very long, and the boss battles are all very much the same. And I didn't really appreciate any of them. So in general, the divine beasts were a big letdown for me, because a big part of the reason I love Zelda is because of the dungeons, because they provide a little bit of fighting and a lot of puzzle solving. And with only 5 puzzles per dungeon and only 4 dungeons, so if I'm concluding this, the divine beasts weren't dungeons, and they didn't have to be, but if they aren't going to be dungeons, I'd like to see them do something really cool with them, and they didn't. They weren't very good, I didn't think. I mean, there were only a few puzzles, none of them were super in-depth or interesting to do, and then there was 4 bosses that were all pretty much the same thing. There wasn't much thought put into the actual aesthetic of the inside of the Divine Beasts. The outsides were very cool, and the way that they moved was very interesting, but the actual place that you're going to be spending your time, not very interesting at all, I didn't think. And those are the two main things of the game. There's the world, which I didn't think was very interesting and didn't have very much to do, and the Divine Beasts, which weren't very interesting and weren't very fun to play in. So I don't think that Breath of the Wild should have been received as well as it was. It is a very good game, and there are a lot of great things about it. And I'm sure that for a lot of people, it is a terrific game. But for me, I just didn't find enough to do in it. And that sounds crazy, because I know people have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in this game. It sounds crazy, but there just isn't enough to do. It's a giant world, and I'm sure a lot of the development went into the world. But besides the world itself, there is not much to do. Ugh, people are gonna hate me. Well, if you like this video, just feel free to watch another one. You don't have to, but I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.